Oh,
Sorry, I'll move. There it is. There's my picture.
I will just add one for those people who are working off a computer, not a PC. If you want to rearrange the pictures, so if, like you want Rabbi Zwerin in the upper left, just
yeah.
take his face and drag the square to the upper left. And if you love seeing David and his wisdom, you can bring David next. And if you want to see, so you can rearrange your screen, but only if you're in a computer, not a tablet or a phone.
Ray, do you want to be in the upper left or the middle, or do you like where you are?
No, it just only affects your screen.
Oh, just my screen?
Whoa,
I'm gonna put him up here.
That is cool.
Oh, but you know what?
I didn't know
Steve,
that.
Steve Kaye went up there with him.
Rabbi Zwerin, did you send them to my nieces?
No, I didn't. I didn't send an Apple card to your nieces. Did you get that fixed, Ellen?
Rabbi, did you get a new iPad?
No, I did not. I'm still working off this miserable laptop that I've had for a number of years, which has never been good. But that's what I'm consigned to until we get my study fixed. The good news is the pipes were wrapped and insulated yesterday, and the drywall went back in. So there is some indication that a renewal is coming.
I have to tell you where Judy Schwartz is today.
Yeah,
Judy
she's doing-
Schwartz is at her grandson Ezra's bar mitzvah. Ezra's in California. Judy is in Denver, and Judy is going to make a speech to honor Ezra at the appropriate time during his bar mitzvah, and the speech will be from here in Denver.
How cute! How cute!
Isn't that cute?
That's right. Did Judy teach him, or
No, she couldn't go to California. He's in California.
how about Michelle? Did Michelle teach him?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't think so. I think that he got tutored in California.
There, okay. Glendale is one of those interesting old cities. That's where the bar mitzvah is. It's in Glendale, California, not far from Pasadena, right at the foot of the mountains. I forget the name of the mountain range, but it's really kind of an old-fashioned modern city. It's got its own tram in the middle of the city. The tram still works.
Your voice is getting lost. Sorry to tell you.
That's from my computer.
How about everybody else mute?
Yeah. That's somebody else's computer. There you go. Can you hear me now? You shake your head.
Did it sound like an ocean?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's my hard drive. It's telling me wonderful stories again.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
In other words,
It's time to visit Dr. Mac.
I hate those sounds. So how are, let's see, who is your, Christoph and Christina are both here. How are things in Deutschland?
Well, in our part of the world, they're getting a little bit more relaxed.
A little more relaxed.
More relaxed. The schools are starting up next week. I don't know if it's a good idea or not, but I don't know about Christoph's part of the world.
Did you get your shot?
Not yet. I'm too young. Monty's, I'm only 74. Monty's due his on the 14th of this month.
Okay. All right.
He's already 80, and I'm only 74. So,
Oh, they're only doing 75 and up?
yep.
Yeah, we're kind of messing up the entire vaccination thing, and allegedly until April we should get like lots of doses, but well, nobody knows, and nobody thinks they can organize it and handle it. So we'll just wait and see. I think this is like the chance where we blow our reputation in being organized, and you'll be the witnesses.
Well, listen, it's okay. Sooner or later, the whole Western world will be shot up, and then it'll take forever to get all of Africa done, and then ultimately the Middle East.
Ray, there was an article today in the Wall Street Journal about Israel wanting to get their workers back to work, and they want them vaccinated before they get back to work. So now, if you don't show that you have been vaccinated, you get fired.
Yeah, well, they just don't let you in, but it's really interesting. Everybody's got a vaccination card, and they put the vaccination card picture on their phones, and now they can get into just about any place with that picture, which is a very smart way of doing things.
I did that.
About 80% of everyone over 60 has now been vaccinated in Israel.
Why don't you take a picture of your vaccination card and put it on your phone?
I did.
Then you don't need to worry about where the card is.
I did. Yeah. Yeah, I did.
Oh, you did that already?
Yeah. No, I gave my card to Ricky, and now all I have to do is worry about where she is.
Yeah, there you go.
I
I'm
still think
gonna store mine where my polio card is. I still have that.
Oh, I don't. Wow.
Yeah,
Kathy.
A polio card?
polio and I forget what else they shot us with. Not much, because we were boomers and we were expendable. But they did give us the, my mom has, it's.
Do you have pneumonia?
No, that was for polio.
I know, but did you get pneumonia vaccinations?
Yeah, when they can catch me. So they tried to give me another one when I was in the hospital. And I got tired of waiting. They'd already checked me out and it was going on 2 hours. And I said, okay, I'm out of here. So, but yeah, I got my vaccination this morning. Yay.
Good for you.
Yeah. So.
And it was the Johnson & Johnson, so she's done.
I'm done.
Really? Oh.
there's still something fishy about all this. There's the incidence and the attack rate goes down and down and down faster than the number of shots are being given. There's something different in the environment that's not letting this virus survive at this time.
Mark,
I don't think it.
I don't
Go
think
ahead.
they know yet. It could be that because many more people have contracted COVID-19 than have been tested for it.
Yeah, they have some herd.
They assume that the number of cases counted is probably 4 or 5-fold more. So maybe a third of the population has already had. But I'm not an epidemiologist. I don't know, other than what I've read.
That's the answer to everything with this. I'm not criticizing. We just don't know. The answers that people want to have, we don't know. But if they tell you that something's true on Wednesday, they change their mind on Thursday.
Yeah. Well, I heard that the death rate is up. It's just the infection rate has gone down. So maybe it's killed off as many as it was going to kill off. Yeah. The beds are going, bed numbers being used for this going down and down. So I don't know.
You sounded like you knew something.
Oh, well, I always sound like that. But I need a nap. So right now, I had to make sure I didn't oversleep for my appointment this morning. And you know what happens when you do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
You may
Yeah.
want to nap this afternoon if the vaccine kicks in too.
Beautiful
So-
day out though. Beautiful
Yeah.
day to be outside.
Yeah, we need to get our lounge chairs back out so we can snooze.
You can nap outside.
Yeah, we've done that. Get some fresh air.
All right, you guys. So let's,
How many chapters are there in Deuteronomy?
oh,
We're on 18, but how many more?
I would think we've got to get through 34.
34?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Not today. It's not going to happen.
Not for quite a while, actually.
It's okay.
Probably a couple more years, but we are making extremely good progress, and now that we're on the verge of getting vaccinated, we may even live to see the end of this book, if we take good care of ourselves. Let's see, where in the world did we end up? I think we ended up on verse 12.
We're going to do something about angels and demons or something like that.
Yeah, I was going to do something on angels and demons today. Let's see.
Yeah, we did that chapter 10, I know, for sure.
Let's see.
But I'm not sure about 11.
I think we just finished 11. Yeah. We talked about voodoo and spellcasters and seance leaders and Yidaoni, spirit guides. So let's see.
Oh, right. Okay.
Shoel Ov, we spent a lot of time on the word Ov, sort of a ghost, someone who asks, a seance teller, and Yidaoni, like a spirit guide, and Doresh El Hametim, and one who inquires of the dead, which would be like the witch of Endor, Saul's witch, who conjures up Samuel for him at the end of Saul's life. And then verse 12 comes along and it says, Ki toavat Adonai kol osei ele. For it is an abomination to the Lord, those who do this. Ubiglal hatoavot ha'ele Adonai Elohecha morish otam mipanecha. And especially those who perform this abomination, the Lord your God will undo the inheritance from before you. They will disinherit. It's interesting. Morish, Yoresh means to inherit, and Morish means to disinherit. It's kind of a weird thing that if you put a verb in a different form, it means the opposite. And I don't know, I think with poded, that might be the only other verb I can think of where it means the opposite. But in English, we have lots of words that mean the opposite without changing the spelling or anything. So for instance, the word cleave means both to stick to and to break apart. In this instance, Yoresh means to inherit, and Morish, it's the Hufal form, or it's the Hufiel form, means to disinherit, which is kind of strange. I did not realize that before. So anyone who does this sort of thing, that's that's abhorrent to God. And because of these abhorrent things, the Lord is dispossessing them before you. So anyone who participates in this kind of a obviously Canaanitic kind of practice is gone. They're not going to be in the land for long. So the question is, what happened to my, come on. I hate working on this laptop. Come on, laptop, go away somewhere. There we go. So the question is, so someone who is dispossessed from the land, what does it mean? What does this mean in terms of ancient Israel? They would just kick someone out of the land. They would send them across the border. And is this analogous to what we do with illegal aliens, those who lie when they enter the country, trying to obtain citizenship? They lie on their citizenship form. Is this what we do with spies? We send them back to the country they came from. Is that what this is talking about? Or is it analogous to that?
Well, it says that God is dispossessing them before you. He's getting rid of all those other things that you might believe in. So he's not doing anything to you. He's doing it to the ghosts and spirits and all of those things.
Yeah, but he's doing it to the people who practice it. He's getting rid of them. He's driving them out of the land. And I'm just saying, is this analogous to what we do when we don't like someone who does certain things? We return them to some other country, or we get rid of them somehow. We send them across the border.
We take away their citizenship if they've been a naturalized citizen. We send them back to their home country.
Right. So I'm just saying, is this analogous? Is it almost like in biblical times, if you worshiped incorrectly, you were sent away. And here, if you do something that is politically incorrect, you're sent away. Is that analogous, or is it a totally different ball game? Or I guess I could go one step further and say, and does anybody care?
Rabbi?
Yeah.
I wonder if it's because these spirits and ghosts and so forth are really standing in for perhaps for a god.
Mm-hmm.
So you are recognizing these spirits as somebody that something that can perhaps take you away from God, take you away from the true God. Somewhat.
Okay, Anita or whoever understood, I don't know why, but I just cannot understand Rita's microphone. Anybody want to interpret what was just said?
Rabbi, she said she was wondering if the spirits referred to in the previous verse were standing in for a god.
Oh, good question, Rita. I think ancient peoples were always trying to figure out what was on God's mind, because that was the only control they had over their universe, and to a certain extent, that was anathema in Jewish thought. That you could never know what was on God's mind until God told you. And so therefore, to try and find out what was on God's mind by going around God telling you what was on God's mind was antithetical to Jewish life. And so therefore, people who did that sort of thing were a threat to monotheism as it was being developed among the Israelites. Remember that they were the only people in the ancient Near East at the time that believed in one God and no other gods beside them. Everybody else was either a pantheist or a dualist. If you were from Persia, you were a dualist. You believed in the God of good and the God of evil, Ahriman and Ahura Mazda. But if you were a Canaanite or an Amorite or a Hittite, Jebusite, whatever, you were a polytheist or a pantheist. Not necessarily a pantheist, because that involves a pantheon. That involves a hierarchy of gods. But polytheism, or paganism as it might be called, involved just a plethora of gods, a god of everything. And therefore you could pick and choose which things you wish to give a god to and go worship them. And we have evidence of polytheists in ancient Israel, just by the nature of the various and sundry idols and statuary that were found in archaeological digs. The two most prevalent were the fertility god Ashtaroth and the god of livestock Baal. So and Baal also became a generic term for various gods, Baalim.
And did God actually do this? I mean, did he rid the area of these people? And if he did, how so?
That's a very good question, Lynn. How would I ever know how to answer that question? But let me just say the evidence is pretty clear that they disappeared. By 900, there were no more Hittites in the land. By about 875, there were no Jebusites, there were no Ammonites. Edom as a country was no longer in existence, although there were still Edomites. Midian was no longer a country. The Philistines were gone by 850 before the Common Era. There were no Philistines left. and very little of them survived, some pottery and some metal works, but that's it. We don't have any literature from them. And what was left were really just called the generic term Canaanites. And the Canaanites, as
Did you
as
freeze?
general rule, left some early writings in northern Syria called Ugarit. But other than that, these people just kind of disappeared by about 850 before the Common Era.
So this
So
was,
did God-
what was the period that this happened?
Slowly but surely, but by about 850 before the Common Era. So the answer is, I don't know if God did it, but the huge Hittite empire went out of business. That's sort of amazing. Of course, they were aided on their way out of business by the Assyrians, who were rising to power. And ultimately, the Assyrians were aided in their demise by the Babylonians, who were rising to power during their time. But in the meantime, did God have a role in this? I don't know. Does God deal with human history? I don't know. That's for others to think about. It's just above my pay grade. Of course, lately everything is above my pay grade. What can I tell you? Okay, so let us see what 13 says, and then 14, because I do want to get to angels and demons. So 13 says, Tamim tiyeh im Adonai Elohecha. That's a simple little verse. You shall be wholehearted. Tamim means pure. Tam it means simple. It could also mean naive. But tamim as a plural word means to be wholehearted in the sense of being pure of mind and of spirit, because it's not a plural. It's not a plural word, because the verb tiyeh is singular. So you shall be tamim. So therefore, it's a concept word meaning wholehearted, pure of mind, pure of spirit, unaffected by the thoughts of the crazies around you. Somebody had a comment? Okay, so 14 now gets into the details of all these people. Ki hagoyim ha'eleh asher ata yoresh otam. Oh, here's the word yoresh again. Because the nations, these nations, asher ata yoresh otam, who you are about to inherit from, that you are about to dispossess, you're about to get rid of. El monanim ve'el kosmim yishamu. They go and they resort to, I guess, I don't know another way of putting it. they resort to soothsayers and kosmim, conjurers, magicians. They listen to them. Va'ata lokain, but you are not that way. Natan lecha Adonai Elohecha. A different way to read it. Va'ata lokain natan lecha Adonai Elohecha. But you, God has not given such people, such things to you.
Okay.
So you don't get soothsayers, you don't get conjurers, and you don't need them. They're not something you should go to. And which reminds me again of Saul, who, as king of Israel, made a big deal out of telling the people exactly this. Don't go to conjurers, don't go to soothsayers, don't consult with these abhorrent peoples who are really in the service of other gods. And then what does Saul do? Oh, and he says, anyone who does so shall be put to death. And what does Saul do toward the end of his life, just before his final battle? He wants to know what's going to happen to him and what he should do. And the only person who could ever give him good advice was Samuel, but Samuel is departed. He's dead. So Saul goes to the witch of Endor. Endor is a city in the northern part of Israel. And he consults there with a witch. Endor is kind of interesting because it means the well of the generation, or the eternal well. It might be some sort of a magical well that this witch drank from. I mean, who knows? There might be some imagination going on here. I don't know where the word Endor comes from, but there is a kibbutz called Endor to this day in Israel, which is somewhere near Mount Gilboa in the lower Galilee. So he goes and he consults the witch of Endor, and he asks her to conjure up Samuel. And she says, I can't do that. The king said that if I do that, I'll be put to death. And he says, don't worry about it. I'll make sure I'll take the responsibility, not you. And she says something like, oh my God, you're the king. And he says, call Samuel. And so she died.
Lost you. You froze.
No, we're missing the end of the story.
Dials the number, and Samuel said, I froze?
Yes, we didn't hear the end of the story.
I missed
it. Left us hanging.
What happened?
We don't know.
You said
you have a slow internet connection.
Oh, okay. Am I back on?
Yes.
Okay. So where did you lose me?
The king said he would take responsibility, and the conjurer says, oh, you must be the king.
Yeah.
And then he said, call Samuel.
Yeah, right. Call Samuel, and he gave her a quarter, and she called Samuel. It might have been. I probably was a local call from Endor, and Samuel said, what are you doing here? Why are you doing this? Did I lose you again?
No, you're okay.
Okay. Why are you bothering me? And Saul says, I need to know what's going to happen. And Samuel says, well, you're going to die.
Whoops.
That's like the old joke about, is there baseball in heaven? The good news is there is baseball in heaven. The bad news is you're pitching tomorrow. So, so the good news is, okay, you got me up. The bad news is I'm bringing you with me. And of course, the next day, Saul goes to battle and he dies on Mount Gilboa. And sure enough, he and his son Jonathan with him. So don't go to soothsayers and don't go to conjurers. That's essentially the message. So now we get to 14, which I just read. Okay, 15. So if I can't go to a conjurer and I can't go to a soothsayer, an augurer, which is someone who reads tea leaves, so how am I going to have access to divine information? And verse 15 comes along and says, Navi mikir becha me achecha kamoni yakim lecha Adonai Elohecha. A prophet from among your people, from among your brethren, like me, God will raise up a lav unto himself. No, God will raise up a lav tish ma'un, and you all shall listen to him, and you shall heed him. You shall. So the deal is here that God is going to raise up it's only through a prophet that you're going to be able to access divine wisdom. That's essentially it.
So-
Only through a prophet.
So how do you distinguish between a prophet and a soothsayer?
I would imagine you don't. I would imagine anyone who called himself a prophet was not going to be listened to. He was probably going to be, because there were probably thousands of people who at one time or another rose up and called themselves a prophet of God. There were probably countless people who were much brighter than the common person. And they were thought to have not just great human wisdom, but also divine wisdom, because their intelligence superseded anything that anyone knew about. There were probably also young children who could, predict who would win the first race at Hialeah. And so people would sort of say, my goodness, there's a wonderkind, and maybe he has God's spirit in him. There were all kinds of prophets, or all kinds of people who called themselves prophets, and there are all kinds of people who were thought to be divinely inspired. And I'm sure this led to a great deal of confusion in ancient times. Listen, in this day and age, our prophets are pundits. Anybody who writes a great op-ed piece it almost is accorded wisdom beyond the norm. And so in those days, and anybody who had insight could have been thought of as a special person. Yeah. Question, somebody? Okay, so I wanted to spend a little time talking about demons and angels. It's very complicated subject, demons and angels, because in a polytheistic society, Demons had one role, and in a monotheistic society, demons had a different role, or different characteristics, I should say. In a polytheistic society, demons ranked as high as angels, and they were always in confrontation with angels. There was always a battle between good spirits and bad spirits. And hence you get this sort of understanding of the ultimate battle at the end of time that is going to take place between the forces of good and the forces of evil, or in the New Testament, the battle of Gog versus Magog that will take place at Megiddo. In a monotheistic system, such as Judaism, one could say that Christianity is monotheistic, but quite frankly, Christianity has many polytheistic overtones because it can't quite figure out how to get the Holy Spirit, Jesus, and God all to be different and yet equivalent. And no matter how hard it tries, it ultimately resorts to, well, it's a mystery, mainly because it's a polytheistic monotheism, and it just doesn't know how else to deal with the equivalence of the three. And all three are needed to make the system work. So here you have this monotheistic system called Judaism, and in Judaism, evil spirits were really accepted as servants of one deity, one God. So demons were servants, angels were servants. They could both operate within the system of God as the overseer. And God used them both as messengers, so to speak. Now, in Hebrew, there's really no equivalent term to the English word demon. It really doesn't exist. There are names of evil spirits, but there's really no generic term for demon. In the ancient Near Eastern world, Babylonia comes to mind when you're trying to figure out what the ancient Near Eastern world looked like, because Babylonia was the earliest of the civilizations. So you're talking about the Chaldeans and the Sumerians and the like. A demon in the ancient Near East was less powerful than a god, and was less of an individual. In other words, a demon couldn't really think for itself. A demon had to be told what to do. It was almost like a robot. It was just that which went out and did the job and then returned to its source. And it could only deal with one message at a time. So it was a limited robot that went and did and came back. And the same thing with an angel. An angel had no individuality. It was also somewhat robotic. It was God's messenger. It was thought in the ancient world that demons had purview over one thing, and that was individual human suffering. When someone got sick, it was because they had been infected by an evil spirit. And the only way to get rid of the evil spirit or the illness was either through a magic rite or some sort of incantation. And therefore the rise of what were called witch doctors, and the rise of strange kinds of healing rites and the like was very prevalent in the ancient Near East. So there are all kinds of incantations that were found, incantations and also omens in ancient Sumeria that were found by the opening up of the intestines and the innards of a goat. Goat and sheep were primarily used. And so you would have these healing priests or omen-telling priests who would analyze an illness of an individual by what they found out from the kishkins of a sacrificed animal. Like reading tea leaves, only you're reading livers and kidneys of an animal to decide on what this evil spirit was all about. And from some of the writings in ancient Ugarit on cuneiform tablets, and there are tens of thousands of these tablets in Elba is the name of the city in northern Syria where these tablets were found. The incantations list 7 or 8 or 10 or 20 classes of demons. And the demons were messengers from the Lord of the underworld, and they march before the Lord of the underworld, and they live especially in deserts, and they live especially near graves. And many of them are ethereal, they're ghost-like, and some of them are spirits of the deceased. And most of them were removed from the bodies of the living because of violence. They were killed in some strange way and not properly buried. So they come and they inflict. This is a way of revenge on the living world. And in fact, those early demons were even given names which responded to the illness that they were responsible for causing. So one god was called fever, and another god was called headache, and another god was called this, that, and the other thing, rash, right, etc. And then there were all kinds of strange demons. There was one called one who was like an old shriveled up demon who killed children and killed newborn babies and was a monster. In ancient Mesopotamia and ancient, Babylon, this demon was called Lil, or Liltu, and in Jewish tradition, she became Lilith and Lilith, the demon of the night, and she was very jealous of children because her great purpose in life was she was a very sexual being. She wanted to have intercourse with a human man and have her own human children, but she never could succeed, and therefore she wanted nothing better than to deprive other women of their of what they gave birth to. So now we come to demonology. We get past the earliest pre-biblical phase and get demons as we find them in the Bible. And we read here that the Israelites were prohibited from using magic in early times. The Bible really doesn't give an assigned role to demons. In fact, in the Torah, we're told that you're not even supposed to tolerate a sorceress, and she's supposed to be put to death if she comes across as a sorceress. And we talked about Saul putting anyone who practiced necromancy, conjuring up the dead, were supposed to be driven out of the land or put to death. And strangely enough, the Bible tells us that illnesses are not from demons. I mean, it goes out of its way to say they're not from demons. And in fact, it says that illnesses are from God. Amos, in one of the most famous verses, says, "Shall there be evil in a city and the Lord has not done it?" So any evil that befalls individuals or that befalls a city is not the working of demons or devils or what have you, or evil spirits, but God. And since we can't know God's workings, we can't project demonology into what happens to human beings. So everything in the world is under the control of the divine, and no evil spirit has power over the divine. And there is no dualism in Judaism where you have an Ahriman and a Ahura Mazda like in Persian dualism. God is all, and God sends forth messengers to do his bidding, so to speak. Let's see. The Israelite conception of demons as it existed in the popular mind resembled in some ways ideas that were held elsewhere. For instance, while demons may exist, they lived in deserts or in ruins. There are some verses in Isaiah and in Leviticus that refer to that, especially with the concept of Azazell being kind of some sort of a demon that lived in the desert, where the goat for Azazell was sent out on Yom Kippur to this place in the desert, or in ruins. As Isaiah would say, don't walk through ruins or the demons will get you. And in Psalm 91, we read that they inflict sicknesses on people. And in Samuel first, they trouble men's minds. But nevertheless, evil spirits are sent by God. For instance, the mysterious being who wrestles with Jacob in Genesis has a trait similar to what other demons would have, namely, he has to be back by dawn. Otherwise, he dies. And so this wrestling partner with Jacob says, "Release me, for the dawn is coming." And Jacob says, "I'm not letting you go till you bless me." He says, "What's your name?" He says, "My name is Jacob." He says, "No more Jacob, but Israel. For you have wrestled with the divine and you have succeeded." And then he hits him on the thigh, and Jacob walks with a limp, and that's the end of that story. So there's a little mischievous mysteriousness to that. But essentially, there seems to have been relatively little fear of the spirits of the dead among the Israelites. And they don't seem in Torah to trouble the living very much. There are some features of Israelite cult worship that do have a sense of the word that I learned from reading Gaster's book on the holy and the profane is one of the strangest words I've ever heard, but it's apotropaic. Apotropaic means that which wards off evil. And so some of the measures that the ancient Israelites took to ward off evil may have been bells on the robe of the high priest. Remember that the high priest had a row of gold ornaments on the bottom, on the hem of his robe. It was a bell and a pomegranate, a bell and a pomegranate, all the way around the bottom of his robe. And the bells made a tinkling sound. And in the ancient Near East, tinkling of bells was a way of keeping away demons. It's the opposite of the Christmas story, where an angel gets its wing every time a bell rings. This is a totally different deal. Every time a bell rings, a demon gets pushed away. But obviously, Midrash says that the bells on the bottom of the robe were so that everyone would know when the priest was moving. Horns were part of an apotropaic measure. The blowing of horns kept away demons, and perhaps the sounding of the shofar was apotropaic to a certain extent, to ward off evil spirits. The burning of incense, demons hated odd smells. Smearing blood on doorposts. The color blue, even to this day, in Arab countries and in Israel as well. Muslims paint their doors blue to ward off evil spirits.
They do in Mexico too, Rabbi.
Yeah.
And some parts of South America.
Yeah. So blue is a sign of heaven, and therefore you'd put heaven on your door to keep hell out, so to speak. And you know, the talit is supposed to have a blue thread in it. And why did it have to have a blue thread? Some said a sign of God. Some said a symbol of royalty, that every person who prayed to God was also royal. And some said, but quietly, perhaps to keep away the evil spirits. Written scriptural texts. The mezuzah was apotropaic.
What keeps all this from being magical?
Magic would be a way of destroying, or a way of conjuring. This was just a way of protecting against.
Rabbi, how would the golem and the dybbuk be thought about?
Oh man, now you're getting into Kabbalah, and you just skipped 2,000 years. But the dybbuk was a totally different thing, and the dybbuk enters into superstition more than it enters into theology. So the dybbuk is just a stuck soul, a soul that could not ascend, and it had no place to be. It couldn't ascend, which is why the word is called dybbuk, because it comes from the word davak, which means to cleave. I shouldn't use that word, which means to stick. Devek is glue. So a dybbuk is that which glues itself to a living person. Now that living person has two souls, one of his or her own, and the other of this other soul that he never asked for, but that confounds him. And so that soul has to be exorcised in order to ascend. Now, one way to ascend would be to conjure that soul out, which is why this is superstition, and then say Kaddish for it and allow it to ascend. So that's a whole different realm of superstition, which comes much later. But the writing of special words, like phylacteries, and it shall be a sign upon your head, upon your hand, and it shall be for frontlets between your eyes. So these symbols, they also have been ways of warding off evil and whatever evil could bring, namely illness, disease, what have you. There were a number in Torah. There were a number of names for demons, and the most interesting of them was called. They were called shade.
Here he is. What?
They were called shadim, which is just enough to sort of rendered as devils or demons, but it doesn't really mean that. It really probably comes from some Akkadian word, demon, devil. But the interesting thing is that shadim is very close to the word Shaddai, which is the name of God. So shade, shad, they're the same word essentially. So to a certain extent, this word is found in Deuteronomy, and we're going to get to it some here at the end of Deuteronomy chapter 32. And so the shadim are some sort of evil spirits that have to be guarded against, and perhaps it's Shaddai's role to guard against the shadim. I don't know. And then there are other kinds of demons, evil spirits. One is called the Seirim, the hairy demons. So now one would have to ask the question, does this have something to do with Mount Seir? And does it have something to do with Esau, who is called the hairy one, because his name comes from Esav, which means grassy field. But he lives in Seir. He lives in what, is a part of Edom. And is Esau supposedly the counterpart of the demon Seirim? I don't know. And then there is Lilith, who appears like, she's the demon of the night who also steals children. And then there is the demon Mavet, which means death. But in the Canaanite, some sort of Canaanite tablet, there is a god named Mot, which also means death as well. So it's possible that Mavet was also some sort of not just the word for death, but also some sort of a demonic spirit. And one of the most interesting figures, who is mentioned in several of the prophets, is and is a major god of the ancient Canaanite religion, was a figure called Resheph. And Resheph was sort of a warrior of some sort, and he was followed around by plague and Dever and Resheph were two gods that kind of went together, plague and destruction, and they were in some sort of a pantheon of the Canaanite. And then finally, you come to Azazell, which is probably the best known of all of the demonic possibilities in the Bible. You know, on Yom Kippur, Aaron got 2 goats. He cast lots. When the lot fell on one goat, that was the goat for God that was offered as a sacrifice to atone for the sins of the of the people. Pardon me, of the people. And the other goat was the goat for Azazell, and a person was chosen to take this goat into the wilderness, and there it had the sins of the Jewish people placed upon its head, and it was sent to the wilderness to Azazell. Wherever that is, whoever that was, whatever that means, but that was essentially the scapegoat, the goat that escaped and got away with the sins of the people on its head. The story is that it was thrown over a cliff or something. If so, then one of the few mountain goats that didn't survive being pushed off a cliff. And there
He's frozen.
There's one other. Am I frozen again? Uh-oh. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
You're back.
Okay. I don't know what's going on here, but this happened yesterday as well. One other, in Proverbs.
It must be a demon. It must be a demon. Your freezing must be a demon's making.
No doubt about it. There's some evil spirit here. The demon of the internet comes in and infects my computer. In Proverbs 30, in a woman of valor, right? Oh no, that's Proverbs 31. Okay, so in Proverbs 30, there is a mention of Aluka. Aluka is the closest we get to a vampire in biblical thought, because Aluka means a leech, that which sucks blood. Yes, and according to Arabic literature, to Arab folklore, this Aluka, or Aluk as she is called in Arab folklore, has 2 daughters, and the 3 of them go around sucking blood from people at night and giggling about their victory, so to speak, and then returning before dawn to wherever they hide. So while the word Aluka occurs in the Bible, we don't have much more to say about it except that it means a leech. But in Arab folklore, the leech becomes sort of a vampire-like figure who goes and sucks blood. Okay, so we finished the Bible, and we get to the intertestamental period between the writing of the Bible and the writing of the Talmud, and a couple of other figures come on the scene, one of which is Satan. But Christianity took Satan and made it a real force for evil, giving it its own domain in its own netherworld. In Jewish thought, Satan, Satan, just means that opposite force, that devilish kind of that impish, that bad imp who provokes turmoil. So in the book of Job, for instance, it's God who says to Satan, who was just hanging out, looking to play a game of backgammon, I guess. God says, there's one guy by the name of Job who just praises me daily. And Satan says, yeah, God, this guy praises you daily because he's good looking. He's got a great wife. He's got a lot of nice kids. He's got an enormous estate. He's wealthy as can be. He's got no problems in the world. If he was poor and ugly and in pain, he'd never praise you. And God says, I don't believe that for a minute. And Satan says, give me a couple of days with him all and we'll see. And God says, okay. Well, what kind of literature is that? That is sort of, it's kind of Greek literature, actually, because it just doesn't fit the Hebrew mind. But anyway, that's how the story begins. The next thing you know, all of Job's family dies. He loses his money. He ultimately ends up with boils on all parts of his body, and his wife is still alive. And he's in great pain and discomfort, and he's got nothing to show for a life lived praising God. And so his wife says, hey, look, curse God and die. And all of a sudden he's got friends who come out of the woodwork and they say, you must have done something wrong. He says, I didn't do anything wrong. And the second one comes and says, no, this wouldn't have happened to you if you had not done one wrong thing. I didn't do anything wrong. I've always praised God. I've always been good. I've always given charity. I've always been, And ultimately, the answer that God, after all of this, why am I suffering? The answer comes to Job through a voice in a whirlwind that says, what the hell do you know about life, buddy? Where were you when I created the world? You have no idea how the world works. And that's God's answer to Job. So, so don't ask questions of why you're suffering. People suffer because they suffer. There's no real reason. It's just the way the world works. There's no other explanation, even though there is another explanation because Satan caused it. But where were you when I created the universe? You don't know anything. When I put the Pleiades in their place and Orion in its place. And the end of the story is Disney. All of his family is returned to him. His goods are returned to him. His cattle come back. His wealth comes back. The boils go away, and it's a happy ending. And he kisses the princess, and they live happily ever after. So there is this Satan character. There's also a demonic spirit called Mastema. And what Mastema does, I have no idea. And then there's another character which we meet in the Torah and we meet in the prophets, but we meet him as just a bad guy. But in the intertestamental period, when the Apocrypha is being written and when the Dead Sea Scrolls are being written, and when the pseudepigrapha is being written, a lot of literature going on in this period. And just before, say, the New Testament, the Gospels start to be written, say 70 of the Common Era, just between 200 BCE and 100 CE. This head of the demons is a guy by the name of Belial, which means without hope, Belial. And in the Bible, bad guys are called Ben Belial, the sons of hopelessness, no goodniks, so to speak. So here in this intertestamental period, the demons are conceived of as tempting people to do evil rather than inflicting harm. And so Belial and Mastema and Satan go around trying to provoke people to do bad things. That's their task in life. So ultimately we get to the Talmud, and the Talmud, the Talmud, the Palestinian Talmud doesn't do much at all with demons. And you would think that the Palestinian Talmud, would have some demonology, but it really doesn't have much. It's called the Jerusalem Talmud, the Palestinian Talmud, the Tiberias Talmud, because it was written in the land of Israel, and it's the shorter Talmud. It was only it was written in the period of about 200 years, from about 200 Common Era to about 400 Common Era, and ultimately codified by Ben Ashi. But the Babylonian Talmud, which is the Talmud written in Babylon, is filled with demonology, just a plethora of demons. And every rabbi who writes something throws in another demon. But there are three main demons, and these three demons are certainly enough to cause all kinds of problems. So one demon, one kind of demon are called the harmful spirits, and they are in Hebrew called mazikim. Mazik, one of the first words I ever learned was the word mazik. My grandmother, Aleha Shalom, used to call me a mazik from the time I could walk, because it was it became in Hebrew the equivalent of an imp, that cute little thing that got into trouble, right? Not getting into trouble because it wanted to get into trouble, but just getting into trouble because it wanted to see what happened if you did something. So it was the curiosity imp. What would happen if I pull on this tablecloth, right? What would happen if I threw the ball against that glass? What would happen if I jumped off of this step into that mud? What would happen if what would happen if I gave a pinch to the girl next door? It's the impish thing, the mazik, that kind of a spirit. So the Talmud is filled with mazikim, who are said to have been created on the eve of the Sabbath of creation. That is, they were created on the eve of the sixth day of creation. The second kind of a demon in the Talmud are called the Shadim, which we've already met before. And these are sort of kind of malevolent forces. They do things that are not just pulling the tablecloth to see what will happen, but they keep pulling it even though they see the glass vase at the end of the table, knowing fully well it's going to break if they keep pulling. Those are the Shadim. And then the last are called the Ruchot Ra'im, the bad spirits. And these are the most malevolent of them all. Babylonian Jews, of course, lived in a world that was filled with demons and spirits and malevolent and sometimes malevolent beings who inhabited the air and the trees and water and roofs of houses and outhouses. And one thing we know about these demons is they are invisible. You can't see them because, as the Talmud says, if we could see them, we couldn't endure. We would just kill ourselves because there are so many of them that each person is surrounded on one side by 10,000 and on another side by hundreds of thousands. And yet, if we awake when there is dew on the ground and we take certain routes outside, we can see the footprints in the form of a rooster's foot in the dew on the ground. That talk about foolishness. But anyway, the Talmud also goes on to say there's a king of the demons, and he's called Ashmodeus. And there's a queen, and she's called Agrat Bat Machala, the daughter of illness. And she has 10,000 demon attendants, each of whom can do harm. You know, so the Talmud is just keeps creating and inventing bizarre and weird.
Right, good, and I'll make the reservation.
And then it goes on to say,
Good. Okay,
whoever's on the phone, please mute yourself. Thanks. And then it goes on to say that demons are especially harmful around palm trees. So, you know, if you live in Florida, be a little more careful. And we don't have to worry so much in Colorado. I don't think there's a single palm tree in the whole state. But if you live in California, a little careful, especially on the golf course. You know, they don't call it a bogey for nothing. There's the bogeyman who's liable to get you. And you know how that works. Especially, oh, God forbid, you should put a hammock between two palm trees. That is the absolute worst. To put a hammock and lay down in a hammock between two palm trees, you are now asking for big time demon infestation. Demons are prone to infest food and drink left under the bed. Does anybody leave food and drink under your bed? Well, stop that. One should refrain from drinking water on Wednesday and Sabbath Eve, Wednesday night and Friday night. And one should never drink water from pools or rivers at night, because that's when demons lurk. And they don't drink water from, you know, on Wednesday night, because you just shouldn't. So some say that scholars, while they are studying, are immune to demons. And others say that because demons are jealous of scholars studying and they want to study, someone studying is the most liable and susceptible to being affected by a demon. So therefore, before reading a holy book, one should recite Psalm 91, which is the psalm of protection against demonic visitations. Let's see, the Talmudic commentators actually say that they accepted the belief in demons, but Maimonides opposed it. So there were those who said, yeah, but Maimonides essentially, who was the ultimate source, said no such thing. This is just play. So now we ultimately get to Kabbalah and then to superstition, and we're done with demons. So the earliest Kabbalists came from Spain, especially the city north of Barcelona, which is called Girona. My God, if you want an interesting place to visit, put Girona on Gerona. Put Girona on your bucket list, because it is just a phenomenally interesting place. So anyway, one of the great commentators of Spanish was Nachmanides. And Nachmanides said that demons, shadim, are to be found in waste and in ruined places and in cold places. I could understand cold places. And he said, such as the north. Well, it's kind of interesting that to a certain extent, Jewish folklore came to the opinion that evil spirits came from the north. Christianity turned it around and said good spirits come from the north, and that's why Santa Claus comes from the North Pole. But Jewish tradition had evil spirits coming from the north, which is why we break a glass at a wedding. Now, you may not know that we break a glass underfoot today, but the original tradition was to take a glass filled with wine. Most weddings were conducted outside in Europe in the first millennia and the beginning of the second millennia, all the way up to today, probably. But certainly in European countries, usually conducted in the courtyard of a synagogue outside. And it was the task of the groom at the end of a wedding ceremony to take the second glass of wine, and there would always be wine in it, and throw it against the north wall of the courtyard. Because demons would then get chased away by the shattering sound. And if they weren't chased away, they would get drunk on the wine that was in the glass. And if they didn't get drunk, they would be cut to shreds by the broken shards. So that's where the custom really originated.
So Rabbi, I'm going to jump in here for a minute. That's why I'm going to share with everyone in a great book, if you want to know about this, Jewish Magic and Superstition by Joshua Trachtenberg. Talks about this. It's an old classic book. And the other reason I understood, Rabbi, was that demons can't see glass. So demons would be cut. And that's why you throw the glass against the north wall.
Yeah.
So, but you can do one last thing before we leave. Talk about the word abracadabra and why it's a Jewish word.
Well,
break it out Hebrew.
Go ahead if you want to.
No, go ahead. You got it.
Well,
start.
So avar kadavar, may this word pass. You can translate it in 100 different ways, but it's really not abra. It's really avara, avera. Avera is a sin, but avara could also mean that which comes from somewhere else. Kadabra is kadavara. As I speak it, may that which may something come to pass, or may that which came to pass go away. So abracadabra is really just another way of saying, watch what happens now. I don't know what Trachtenberg said, and I'm not sure what the holy and the profane Gaster said, but it's sort of that.
Yeah. Or of, father of the evil thing is one way to say. He plays to translate with.
Oh.
Father of the evil action, the master of the evil action. It's interesting. He's got a whole section on abracadabra, which is just a. So if you're interested in this stuff, it's a little dry, but it's a great book to read. And you can own a copy for $4.95.
Whoa, that's cheap.
If I say Baruch Atah Adonai, will my lunch magically appear now? It's 12 o'clock.
It will disappear.
Probably in about 20 minutes. That is, if you call the correct caterer.
Rabbi Zwerin, you see a lot of divots on the golf course.
Yes, there are a lot of divots on the golf course. That's right. Yes.
Thank you, Lee.
The question is, why would somebody want to replace a Dybbuk? But then again,
They're replaced because they're guilty.
Well, in any event, next week we can do a little bit of angelology, but maybe not in as much detail. I just want to leave you with the fact that there is also there are also evil spirits that aren't so evil. They are called Selim, jesters, and so jesters as demons just were practical jokers. So the Kabbalah,
Adult Maziks.
yeah, Kabbalists had a sense of humor as well, and there were also other demons called Leitzim, which are also jesters, and they fill all kinds of pages of folklore among the Hasidim and the Kabbalists.
They would say, "Take my demon, please."
Exactly. All right, everybody, listen, have a great day. Enjoy.
Rabbi, stick around for a minute. I've got a suggestion for you.
Good, will do.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Shabbos all. Shabbos, Shabbos.
Bye-bye.
Good Shabbos.
Thank you.
Good Shabbos.